Eli was just an ordinary guy, working as a mechanic on a bustling space station called Nova Station. The station orbited a distant planet where humans and aliens lived together, each with their own part to play in keeping things running smoothly. Eli wasn't particularly special. He was just another face among the workers, fixing ships, repairing equipment, and dealing with the everyday struggles of life. He wasn't looking for anything extraordinary, especially not after the heartbreak he'd gone through years ago. His life was quiet. It was comfortable, but he wasn't truly happy. He kept to himself, reading old books, working on mechanical projects, and occasionally having brief chats with the few people he trusted. He had learned long ago that relationships were complicated. After the loss of someone he cared about deeply, he decided that love wasn't worth the risk. It was easier to live alone. But everything changed the day Lyra arrived. She was different. Not just because she was an alien, but because of the way she moved through the space station with such confidence and grace. Lyra was tall, with long, silver hair that shimmered under the station's artificial lights, and eyes that seemed to see right through you. She wasn't like anyone Eli had met before. There was an air about her that made him nervous, though he couldn't understand why. He had never been particularly shy, but something about her made him feel out of his element. The first time they met was by chance. Eli was working on a damaged ship near the station's docking bay, trying to fix a broken circuit. He had just tightened a bolt when a soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "Are you the mechanic?" she asked, her voice musical, as if it had a rhythm of its own. Eli looked up, startled. Standing before him was Lyra, her eyes glowing faintly under the light. He quickly wiped his hands on a rag, trying to act normal. "Yeah, I'm Eli," he said, trying to sound casual. "What do you need?" She smiled at him, and for a moment, Eli thought he might lose his breath. "I need help with a small issue." "On my ship? Could you take a look?" Eli nodded, still feeling a bit out of sorts. He had worked on countless ships before, but something about this one felt different.
Yes.
As he followed her to her ship, his mind began to wander. But notice the way she moved, the way her silver hair swayed with each step. He didn't want to, but his thoughts drifted to places they shouldn't. A small part of him wondered what it would be like to kiss her, to feel her skin against his, too. Eli quickly shook his head, trying to refocus. He had to keep it together. It wasn't like him to think such things, especially not about someone like her. She was alien, after all. She would never be interested in someone like him. Lyra led him to her ship, and as he started inspecting the engine, he couldn't help but feel her eyes on him. There was something strange about her gaze. It was like she wasn't just looking at him, but into him, like she could see his every thought. For a moment, he felt exposed. After a few minutes, Lyra spoke again, her voice playful. "You know, Eli," she said, "you have some very interesting thoughts." Eli froze, his hands stilling on the ship's engine. He looked up at her, feeling a rush of panic. He'd been thinking about her about things he definitely didn't want to share with anyone. His mind raced, wondering how much she had heard. "What do you mean?" he asked, trying to act casual, but his heart was pounding in his chest. Lyra smiled, her expression unreadable. "I mean," she began, "I can hear your thoughts, Eli. All of them." Eli's stomach dropped. "What? How?" he stammered, his voice suddenly trembling. Lyra laughed softly, a sound that was both comforting and unsettling at the same time. "I'm not like most people," she said. "I can read minds. It's not something I can turn off, but don't worry, your thoughts are safe with me." Eli's face turned red, and he quickly looked away, feeling embarrassed. He couldn't believe it. All this time, while he was thinking things he never meant to say out loud, she had been listening. Every single one of his thoughts, his deepest, most private thoughts, the ones he kept buried deep down. She leaned closer, her voice soft but teasing. "I don't mind, though. In fact, I find it fascinating." But Eli didn't know how to respond. He wasn't sure if he wanted to hide or run away. You heard all that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra nodded, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "I heard everything, Eli. All your doubts, your fears, your desires." She paused, her smile widening. "And I must say I find them quite, charming?" Eli was speechless. How could she be so calm about this? How could she say those words like it was no big deal? I know this must be overwhelming, she said, sensing his discomfort. But don't worry. I'm not here to judge you. I've spent my whole life hearing people's thoughts. I've learned to understand and accept what people are really thinking, what they're too afraid to say. Eli stood there for a moment, unable to form a sentence. He didn't know whether to feel relieved or mortified. She wasn't disgusted by him. She wasn't repulsed by the things he thought about when he looked at her. She smiled, as if reading his mind. Trust me, Eli. I'm not offended. I find your thoughts, endearing. In a way, they make me feel closer to you. He didn't know how to respond to that. She found his thoughts endearing. He had always thought his mind was a bit of a mess, filled with all sorts of random, embarrassing things. But here she was, telling him she liked them, that she didn't mind. It didn't make sense, but in a strange way, Eli felt a connection with Lyra that he hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe it was the fact that she saw him for who he truly was, not just the image he projected to the world. Maybe it was the way she made him feel accepted, flaws and all. As they finished up the repairs on her ship, Lyra glanced at him one last time before walking away. I'll be seeing you, Eli. And next time, don't be afraid to let me in a little more. Your thoughts are... interesting. Eli stood there, frozen, staring after her. His mind was spinning and he wasn't sure what to think anymore. All he knew was that his world had just been turned upside down, and he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Eli couldn't stop thinking about Lyra. It had been 2 days since their strange encounter, and he found himself replaying every moment in his mind, over and over again. Her smile, her teasing words, the way she had looked at him when she told him she could hear his thoughts, it was all so unreal. He had never met anyone like her. At first, Eli thought maybe he had imagined it all. Perhaps she had been joking, or maybe he had just been too nervous, too awkward around her to see things clearly. But then, just the thought of her, what she had said, sent his heart racing again. She had heard everything, his every thought, every private feeling, every embarrassing idea he had about her. And I wasn't sure if he should be mortified or flattered, and then it happened again. Eli was working on a ship near the docking bay when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned to see Lyra standing there, her usual calm expression on her face. But today, there was something different about her, something that made him feel even more exposed than before. Hey, Eli, she said, her voice light and friendly. How's the ship coming along? Eli wiped his hands on his rag and tried to act normal. It's fine, just a few more adjustments. He glanced at her, feeling a strange mix of nervousness and excitement. What brings you here? Lyra smiled. But it wasn't just a smile. It was the kind of smile that made Eli feel like she knew something he didn't. Something important. I was thinking about our conversation the other day, she said, her eyes twinkling with mischief. I've been hearing your thoughts. More than you realize, Eli's stomach sank. He felt his face flush with embarrassment. His heart was pounding in his chest as he tried to keep his cool. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable, he said, stammering. It's not something I can control. Lyra laughed softly, shaking her head. Oh, Eli, you're not making me uncomfortable. She stepped closer to him, her eyes soft and sincere. In fact, it's the opposite. I find it fascinating. The things you think about, the things you want, it's all very human, very real. Eli's breath caught in his throat. You don't mind? She shook her head again. Not at all. I actually like it. Your thoughts are, well, they're a little messy, sure. But they're honest. I think that's what makes them so appealing. Eli didn't know how to respond. He had never thought of his own thoughts as something worth liking. To him, they were just fleeting moments of desire, doubt, and confusion. He didn't even understand half of what his own mind was telling him. Eli started. But Lyra cut him off with a smile that seemed to make everything feel lighter. You don't need to explain yourself, she said. I know what you're thinking, and I'm not judging you. Honestly, it's nice to meet someone so real. Most people are afraid to let their true thoughts show. But you wear them on your sleeve? Eli wasn't sure how to feel. He'd never been good at showing his true self to others, especially not someone as perfect as Lyra. He had always kept his thoughts to himself, afraid of rejection. And now, here she was, telling him that she found those same thoughts endearing. He shifted uncomfortably. I'm not perfect, you know, he said quietly. I have a lot of flaws. I think about things I shouldn't. Things that make me feel embarrassed. Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch gentle but firm. I understand, she said softly. But those things, those thoughts, they're part of who you are. And that's what I like. You're not hiding anything from me, Eli. You're just you. For a moment, Eli didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to being accepted like this. He was used to people seeing only what he allowed them to see, hiding the rest away where no one could find it. But Lyra wasn't like the others. She wasn't scared of his flaws. She didn't turn away when she saw the messy parts of his mind. Eli looked at her, his heart racing again.
Oh.
So, you're okay with it? He asked, still unsure. Lyra smiled warmly. I'm more than okay with it. In fact, I find it charming. Eli blinked, his confusion only deepening. Charming, she nodded.
Yes.
You're not trying to be someone you're not. You're not hiding behind a mask. And I appreciate that more than you know. She paused, then added, most people in my world try so hard to be perfect. They're constantly afraid of what others might think. But you're real. Eli wasn't sure if he felt relieved or even more exposed. He'd always been the kind of person who kept his guard up, who didn't let people see the real him. But Lyra wasn't just seeing him. She was seeing his raw thoughts, his deepest fears, and yet she was still here, still talking to him like it was no big deal. It felt nice. Lyra stepped back, giving him some space.
Oh.
I just wanted to let you know, she said, that I appreciate you, Eli. More than you realize. Eli didn't know how to respond to that. He had never been good at accepting compliments, especially not from someone like her. You're different, he said, trying to find the right words. Lyra tilted her head, her smile softening. And you're exactly what I needed. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Eli standing there, feeling like his whole world had just shifted. He didn't understand it. He didn't understand how someone could accept him so completely, so icily. But one thing was for sure, he couldn't stop thinking about her, about Lyra, about how she saw him, not for what he showed the world, but for what lay beneath the surface. And for the first time in a long time, Eli felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. After their last conversation, Eli couldn't get Lyra out of his mind. He tried to focus on his work, trying to keep himself busy with repairs on the station, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face. Her voice echoed in his mind. It wasn't the teasing tone anymore. It was something warmer, something deeper. She had told him she appreciated him, flaws and all. No one had ever said that to him before, and it left him both confused and curious. Lyra was unlike anyone Eli had ever met. She wasn't just beautiful. She was open in a way that made him feel both seen and vulnerable. She could read his thoughts, his deepest desires and doubts, yet she didn't recoil from them. In fact, she seemed to embrace them. Eli tried not to overthink it. He tried to remind himself that she was just an alien, someone from a different world with a different way of thinking, but there was a part of him that couldn't ignore how natural it felt to be around her. He had never felt this drawn to someone, not even in the years before his heartbreak. The next time Eli saw her, he was in the station's cafeteria, picking up a quick meal. He was trying to keep a low profile, not wanting to make a big deal of his feelings. But when Lyra walked in, everything changed. She entered the room like she always did, confident, graceful, and with that undeniable presence that made everyone stop and look. But this time, when her eyes met Eli's, he felt something different. It wasn't just curiosity or the usual rush of attraction. It was a pull, like something deep inside him was connecting with her. She smiled, walking straight to his table. Mind if I join you? She asked, her voice light but warm. Eli looked up, surprised. He quickly motioned to the seat across from him, of course. I wasn't expecting. Well, this, Lyra laughed, sitting down gracefully. Think you would? She said, her smile lingering as she picked up her meal. But I thought it was time we talked again. really talked. Eli felt a strange mix of nerves and excitement. He'd been thinking about her nonstop, but he didn't know what to say now that she was sitting across from him. She had heard his thoughts, after all. She knew all his secrets, his deepest feelings, things he had never shared with anyone. What if she thought less of him for it? "I've been thinking about what you said," Eli began slowly, unsure of how to proceed. "About my thoughts, ... and how you don't mind them. I'm just not used to that. People don't usually like what's inside my head." Lyra looked at him intently, her eyes softening. "Eli, you're not the only one with messy thoughts. We all have them. Even I do." She paused, smiling as she set her food aside. "But here's the thing, those thoughts are what make us real. What make us who we are. Without them, we'd be nothing more than perfect shells. And I'm not looking for perfect. I'm looking for truth, for honesty. For someone who's not afraid to be himself, even when it's hard." Eli swallowed hard. He wasn't sure what to say to that. Part of him wanted to tell her how much her words meant to him, but he was afraid it would sound too much like he was opening up, something he had always avoided. Still, there was a part of him that couldn't ignore the way she made him feel. Like he could breathe again, like he didn't have to hide everything. He took a deep breath, I guess. "I've never really felt like I was enough. Not for anyone, not even for myself." He looked away, staring at his food. "But with you, it's different. You make me feel like I'm not just the sum of my mistakes." Lyra reached out, placing her hand gently on his. The contact sent a small shock through Eli, but it was warm, comforting. "Eli," she said softly, "you are enough. You always have been. Don't let anyone, even yourself, tell you otherwise." Her words were simple, yet they felt like a weight had been lifted from his chest. For the first time in a long time, Eli felt like he wasn't carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. It was like someone had finally seen him for who he truly was and not turned away in disgust. "I've been thinking about you too," Lyra continued, her voice gentle but serious. "The more I hear your thoughts, the more I understand. You. Not just the thoughts you want to share, but the ones you're afraid to speak aloud. And I like them. All of them. Even the messy ones." Eli's heart skipped a beat. "You like my messy thoughts?" "Shh." She nodded, her eyes sparkling with sincerity. "I do. I think they're beautiful in their own way. They show me the real you. And that's what I like about you, Eli. Not just your actions, but your mind, your heart, everything that makes you ... you." Eli didn't know how to respond. No one had ever spoken to him like that. It wasn't just about what he could do, or what he looked like. It was about everything he was, down to his deepest fears and desires. They sat in silence for a while, the noise of the cafeteria fading into the background as Eli let her words sink in. He had always been afraid of showing his true self, afraid that people would reject him for the things he thought, for the things he wanted. But here was Lyra, accepting him completely. "I don't want to hide from you anymore," Eli finally said, his voice quiet but determined. "I've spent so much time building walls around myself, afraid of letting anyone see the real me, but with you, I feel like I don't need those walls anymore." Lyra's smile softened, her hand still resting on his. "Then don't hide anymore. You don't have to. Not with me." Eli felt a wave of emotion wash over him. For the first time in years, he felt like he could breathe. He could be himself, messy thoughts, imperfections, and all. And Lyra, she was still there, still accepting him, still seeing him for who he is. Truly was. As they finished their meal, Eli felt a connection with her that went deeper than anything he had ever known. It wasn't just about attraction or curiosity anymore. It was about trust. About finding someone who understood him without the need for words, without the need for pretense, and for the first time in a long time, Eli felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Eli woke up with a strange feeling in his chest. It had been a week since his last conversation with Lyra, and he couldn't stop thinking about her. He spent most of his time working, trying to keep his mind occupied, but her words lingered. In his thoughts, "You don't have to hide anymore," she had said. No. Those words kept playing over and over in his mind. like a melody he couldn't forget. As the days went by, Eli felt something shifting inside him. He had always kept to himself, hiding behind walls built from old fears and past heartbreaks. But Liarushi saw through all that. She saw him, the real him. And it wasn't just her mind-reading ability that made him feel this way. It was the way she made him feel seen, accepted, and understood. No one had ever done that before. But as much as he wanted to believe that this connection was real, Eli couldn't shake the doubt that still clung to him. Was he enough for her? Could someone like Lyra, someone so confident, so self-assured, really want someone like him? He was just a Mechanica regular guy with nothing special to offer. That morning, as he worked on a ship in the repair bay, he felt a familiar presence behind him. He didn't need to turn around to know it was Lyra. He could feel her near, like an unspoken energy filling the space between them. "Hey, Eli," she said softly, her voice just above a whisper. She had that same warm smile on her face, but there was something else in her eyes, a hint of something deeper, something more serious. Eli stood up, wiping his hands on a rag, trying to keep his thoughts from spiraling. "Hey, Lyra," he said, trying to sound casual. "What's up?" She stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his. "Been thinking about us," she said, her tone gentle but steady. "About how we've been getting closer, how we've been talking more." Eli's heart skipped a beat. He had been thinking about their connection too, but he wasn't sure if she felt the same way. "Yeah, I've been thinking about that too," he said, his voice quieter now. I don't know what this is, Lyra. I don't know what to make of it." She smiled softly, her eyes full of understanding. "You don't have to make sense of it, Eli. You don't have to have all the answers right away. What I do know is that I like being around you, like hearing your thoughts, your honest thoughts. You're real with me, and that's all I need." Eli felt a rush of emotions. It was everything he had been longing to hear, but a part of him still couldn't believe it. I'm not sure if I can believe that. I've been hiding so much of myself for so long, and now that you've seen everything, I just ... I don't know if it's enough." Lyra took a step closer, reaching out and gently taking his hand in hers. The warmth of her touch sent a wave of comfort through him. But the uncertainty in his chest was still there. "You don't have to hide anything from me, Eli," she said softly, her voice steady. "You don't need to be perfect. I don't need you to be anything other than who you are. You don't have to put on a mask with me." Eli's heart ached at her words. He had spent so many years putting on a mask, pretending to be someone he wasn't. It was easier than showing the real Eli. The Eli with flaws, doubts, and fears. But Lyra wasn't asking him to be perfect. She wasn't asking for some version of himself he could never be. She wanted him just as he was. "I've never let anyone see all of me before," Eli admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "Not like this. Not in the way you have. I don't know how to handle it." Lyra smiled, her eyes soft with affection. "You don't have to handle it, Eli. You just have to be yourself, and that's enough for me." Eli felt a lump form in his throat. He had never felt this vulnerable before, but in that moment, it wasn't a bad thing. It wasn't a feeling of weakness. It was a feeling of connection, a deep, honest connection he hadn't allowed himself to have in years. "I don't know how to do this," Eli whispered. "I don't know how to let go of everything I've been holding on to." Lyra squeezed his hand, her voice low and comforting. "You don't have to do it alone. We can do this together. I'm not asking for you too changed, Eli. I'm just asking for you to trust me. Trust that I won't leave. Trust that you're enough, just as you are." Eli looked into her eyes, feeling something stir inside him. It was like a floodgate had opened. He had spent so much time building walls around his heart, but now, with Lyra, he was starting to see that he didn't have to keep everything locked. Inside, maybe it was time to let someone in. Maybe it was time to let her in. "I trust you, Lyra," Eli said, his voice steady for the first time in days. "I don't know what this is between us, but I'm willing to see where it goes. Willing to try." Lyra's smile widened, and for a moment, Eli thought the whole room seemed to brighten. "That's all I need to hear," she said softly. "And I promise you, Eli, I'm here for all of it. The messy thoughts, the mistakes, everything. I'll be here as long as you'll let me." Eli felt his heart swell with warmth. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy. But it felt right. For the first time in a long time, Eli felt like he wasn't alone in his struggles. He wasn't the only one trying to figure things out. They stood there for a moment, their hands still intertwined, and Eli knew that whatever happened next, they would face it together. He didn't need all the answers right away. He didn't need to understand everything. All he needed was Lyra, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Eli couldn't stop thinking about the conversation he'd had with Lyra. Since that moment, everything felt different. He had opened up to her in a way he had never opened up to anyone before. She had accepted him, flaws, doubts, and all. For the first time in a long time, he felt free. He no longer had to hide behind walls of fear and uncertainty. But even though things felt easier between him and Lyra, a lingering question still gnawed at him. Could they really be together in a world where everything around them seemed to be against it? The truth was, Lyra wasn't just any ordinary person. She wasn't even human. She was an alien, a member of a species that had their own rules, their own customs, and their own expectations. Eli knew that their connection was something special, something unique. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that being with Lyra might not be as simple as just being two people who cared about each other. There were other people out there, people who might not understand or approve of what was happening between them. A few days later, Eli and Lyra found themselves sitting in a quiet corner of the station's cafe, talking as usual. Eli was trying to enjoy his coffee, but the thought of the challenges they might face kept coming back to him. He hadn't been able to shake the feeling that something was going to happen, something that could change everything. Thinking, Eli said, his voice hesitant as he placed his cup down. What happens if people find out about us, about you and me? Lyra didn't immediately respond. She simply stared at him for a moment, her gaze calm but thoughtful. You're worried about what others will think, aren't you? She asked, her voice soft. Eli nodded, his fingers tapping nervously on the table. It's not just that. I mean, you're not like anyone I've ever known. And we're from different worlds, Lyra. What if the others don't accept us? What if they think we shouldn't be together? Lyra's expression didn't change, but there was something in her eyes that gave Eli a sense of reassurance. Eli, I understand your concerns. Trust me, I do. But we can't control what other people think or feel. All we can control is what we do and how we treat each other. Eli sighed, feeling the weight of her words. But it's not that simple. This is more than just us. Everything. Our cultures, our differences, our species. Lyra reached across the table and gently placed her hand on top of his. The warmth of her touch was a small comfort, but it still didn't ease the fear in his chest. I know it's complicated. I know it's not easy. But if we're truly meant to be, Eli will figure it out together. As her words sank in, Eli couldn't help but feel a mix of hope and dread. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that they could be something more than just two people from different worlds. But the reality of the situation was far more complicated than he wanted to admit. The next day, Eli's concerns started to feel more real than ever. As he walked through the station's corridors, he overheard a conversation between two of the station's crew members. They were talking in hushed tones, but the words still reached Eli's ears. Have you heard about Lyra? One of them asked. She's been spending a lot of time with that human mechanic. It's just ... strange, you know? I heard she's been involved with him on a deeper level. Not sure how I feel about that, the other crew member responded. With a nervous chuckle, yeah, I heard. It doesn't sit right with me. I mean, humans and aliens. It's crossing a line. I don't know why she's doing this. Eli's heart sank as he listened. The whispers, the judgment, he could feel it all around him. They didn't know him. They didn't know Lyra. But still, their words stung. He couldn't help but wonder. How many others felt the same way? Later that day, Lyra found him in one of the quiet observation rooms, staring out at the distant stars. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him before stepping inside. Eli, she said softly, her voice breaking through his thoughts. What's wrong? Eli didn't turn around right away. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. I overheard something, he said, his voice heavy with uncertainty. People are talking, they're saying. Things about us. Lyra didn't say anything at first. Instead, she walked up behind him and placed a hand on his shoulder. Her touch was gentle, comforting. What did they say? She asked quietly. They're not happy about us being together, Eli said, turning to face her. They don't understand. They're saying it's strange, wrong even. Lyra sighed, but there was no anger in her eyes, just a quiet sadness. I know there are people who won't understand, she said, her voice calm. There are always people who will judge us for what we do, for who we love. But I'm not going to let them tear us apart. Eli felt a sense of relief wash over him, but it was fleeting. But what if they do? What if the whole station starts turning against us? What if we can't be together because of it? Lyra looked at him with a quiet strength in her eyes. We can't control what others think. Eli, we can only control how we react. If we let fear stop us, then we're giving them power. But if we stand together, if we face this challenge as a team, we'll be stronger for it. Eli's mind raced. There was still so much fear inside him, fear of the unknown. But as he looked into Lyra's eyes, he realized something. He didn't want to lose her. He didn't want to walk away from the first person who had ever truly seen him for who he was. Not because of what others thought. I'm with you, Lyra, Eli said, his voice firm. No matter what happens, I'm not letting them tear us apart. Lyra smiled, a soft, warm smile that reached her eyes. I knew you'd say that. Together, they stood by the window, gazing out at the stars. It wasn't going to be easy. They would face challenges, and they would have to fight against people's judgment. But in that moment, Eli knew that as long as they stood side by side, they could face anything. Eli had always been a quiet person. He wasn't someone who liked to stir the pot or challenge the status quo. He was comfortable in his routine, keeping to himself, working on ships, fixing things, and staying out of the way. But everything had changed since Lyra came into his life. At first, he had resisted the idea of being with her. She wasn't human. She had the ability to read his thoughts. How could he possibly be with someone who knew him so well, who knew his deepest, most vulnerable thoughts? The thought of it terrified him. But now, as he stood next to her, looking out at the stars, he realized that nothing had ever felt more right. The rumors and whispers still lingered around the station. There were still people who didn't understand their bond, people who thought it was unnatural. Eli couldn't deny that he still felt the weight of their judgment, but something had shifted within him. He didn't care anymore. He had spent too many years hiding from the truth of who he was, and now, with Lyra, he was finally able to embrace himself, his thoughts, his flaws, his desires, and share them with someone who accepted him fully. Lyra had become his anchor, the one person who saw him for who he truly was and didn't turn away. She had told him countless times that she didn't care about his imperfections. But it wasn't just about her acceptance. It was about his acceptance of himself. He had spent so much time trying to hide his true nature, pretending to be someone he wasn't, that he had almost forgotten what it felt like to be genuine. But with Lyra, he didn't need to hide. He didn't have to pretend. That night, as they sat together in the observation deck, looking out at the endless expanse of stars, Lyra spoke up, her voice soft but steady. Eli, she began, her eyes focused on the stars. I've been thinking, Eli. Turned to her, his heart beating a little faster. About what? He asked, his voice almost a whisper. "About us," she said, her gaze shifting from the stars to him. "I know we've faced some challenges, and I know that not everyone understands what we have, but I think it's time we stop worrying about what others think." Eli looked at her, feeling a sense of relief. "I agree," he said. "For the longest time I let other people's opinions control me. I didn't think I was good enough to be with someone like you, someone so different. But now, I don't care anymore." Lyra smiled, her eyes softening. "You were good enough, Eli. You always were. And I've always seen you for who you are. I didn't need to read your mind to know that." Eli's chest tightened with emotion. He had never felt so understood, so accepted. And he realized that he had never truly believed in his own worth until Lyra had shown him how to do so. I don't want to lose you," Eli said quietly. "I don't want to let fear stop me from being with you." Lyra reached out, taking his hand in hers, her touch warm and comforting. "You won't lose me, Eli," she said, her voice steady and sure. "I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not letting anyone else dictate our future." Eli looked at her, the weight of her words sinking in. "You're right," he said, his voice filled with newfound resolve. "We can't let anyone tell us what we can and can't be. This is our journey, and I want to take it with you." Lyra squeezed his hand, a smile tugging at her lips. "I want that too." The first time in a long time, Eli felt like he was standing on solid ground. He wasn't afraid anymore, not of what others thought, not of his own imperfections. He was ready to embrace the future, whatever it held, and he was ready to face it with Lyra by his side. The next few days passed. In a blur, Eli and Lyra spent more time together, their bond growing stronger with each passing moment. They faced the whispers and the judgment together, not letting anything or anyone come between them. And as they continued to face the challenges ahead, they found strength in each other. There were still moments of doubt. Moments when Eli questioned whether they could truly make it. He still saw the glances, heard the whispers, but each time he remembered Lyra's words, "We can't let anyone tell us what we can and can't be," and he realized that as long as they had each other, nothing else mattered. One evening, as they stood together on the station's observation deck, Lyra turned to Eli with a smile that reached her eyes. "You know," she said, "I think this is just the beginning for us. We've already come so far, but there's so much more ahead. I don't want to face it with you." Eli smiled, his heart swelling with affection. "I'm ready for it," he said, his voice filled with certainty. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together. We're stronger than we think." Lyra nodded, her smile widening. "Together," she agreed as they looked out at the stars. Eli knew that no matter what challenges the future might bring, they would face them side by side. They had already overcome so much more than either of them had thought possible. And as long as they had each other, they could handle anything. This was just the beginning of their journey, and Eli was ready for whatever came next. He wasn't afraid anymore, not of the unknown, not of the people who didn't understand, not of the future. Because now he had Lyra, and with her by his side, anything was possible.